And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Today's sea ice analysis here showing continuing to advance to the southwest here with ice getting thin ice, at least some strips getting very close there to Northeast Point and St. Paul Island area. And so not much change in the pattern expected in the next few days, so may see some ice showing up around the island there. And of course, well southwest of St. Matthew Island now on into Bristol Bay. And for the pattern, or for the weather tonight, we've got rain and snow spreading northward here across the southeast coast, and to a lesser extent from the North Gulf Coast. A lot of clouds here over the eastern interior, but some clearing down into south central Alaska. Isolated snow showers or flurries of little significance here in that. And clear and cold again, north slope, Arctic coast, western interior, and the northern Bering Sea. Only a weakening front out here that will pretty much hold in place, continue to weaken into Friday. And southeast coast is warm front building ridge aloft and over the western part of Canada there, pushing this warm front northward with rain ending over the southern areas there. And from there, that warm front even pushes farther north and back to the west, spreading moisture and clouds into the southeast interior. North Gulf Coast heading westward here, cloudy sky, south central Alaska. Most of the precipitation will be from the Chugach Mountains eastward and little, if any, to the west, but winds increasing for the western Arctic coast and actually through the passes of the Brooks Range with that tightening gradient. Mostly sunny and spring-like over the southern panhandle, and still unsettled out over the Aleutians with a couple of weak systems out there. For the coastal water forecast for the southeast coast, south to south winds 25 to 30 knots. Central coast, east winds at 30, and the north coast, northeast winds 15 to 25 knots. Lynn Canal, south winds 20 knots with higher gusts, southeast at 20 for both Stevens Passage and Clarence Strait. And then the outlook for the first day of the weekend here. Southeast winds 20 to 25 knots on the south coast, central coast east 25 to 30 knots, and the north coast east winds 30 to 40 knots. Lynn Canal, Stevens Passage, and Clarence Strait, as well as other areas on the inside waters, southeast winds 20 knots with seas at 4 feet. Prince William Sound, east winds 15 knots, seas 2 feet. North Gulf Coast, east to northeast winds at 15 knots. Light variable winds for the Barren Islands tomorrow. Kamishak Bay and southern Cook Inlet, north winds at 15 knots. And moving on to the first day of the weekend for Cook Inlet, north winds 15 to 25 knots here, north at 30 for Kamishak Bay, northeast 25. Barren Islands, western North Gulf Coast, a little brisker here for the eastern North Gulf Coast with east winds at 30 to 35 knots. And small craft advisories in Prince William Sound, east winds 25 knots, seas around 4 feet. Kodiak Island, variable to northeast winds 10 to 15 knots for the day Friday. Bristol Bay, Alaska Peninsula, north to northeast winds at 10 knots. And then for Saturday, north to northwest winds 15 knots for the Alaska Peninsula. Bristol Bay, north at 15. Kodiak Island, north to northwesterlies 30 knots, seas at about 10 feet. And for the eastern Aleutians, east winds 15 to 20 knots. Friday, central Aleutians, east winds 25 to 30 knots. And out here to the west, kind of a variable wind pattern there at 15 to 25 knots. Then for Saturday, east winds 25 to 30 knots from Shimia all the way to Amchitka Island. Eastern Aleutians, east winds 15 to 20 knots. Or the central Aleutians, Adak and Atka, I think I said that, or the central Aleutians, east winds 15 to 20 knots, and the eastern Aleutians, north to northeast winds at 15 knots. And for St. Lawrence Island and the southwest coast, north winds 15 knots for Friday, northeast at 15 for Norton Sound. And for the St. Matthew Island area, as well as the Pribilofs, northeast winds 15 knots with seas 5 to 7 feet. And for Saturday, north winds 20 knots, St. Paul, St. George, St. Matthew Island, St. Lawrence Island, Yukon, Kuskokwim Delta Coast, and Norton Sound, all north 20 knots for the day Saturday. And for the eastern Beaufort Sea coast tomorrow, west winds 10 to 15 knots, pretty light here on the central coast at about 5 knots, turning east to northeast 15 to 20 knots. For the western Arctic coast and the Chukchi Sea, north 10 to 15 knots. And then for Saturday, winds picking up here on the western Arctic coast, down to about Cape Lisburne, northeast 25 knots, and the Chukchi Sea, north to northeast winds at 20 knots. Northeast at 10 for the central coast, and variable 5 to 10 knots for the eastern Beaufort Sea coastline.